Hello, everyone. Welcome to our National Financial Literacy Campaign. What we're going to talk about is we're going to go over Workshop 1 in this session, Building Savings and Wealth. And it's important because at the end of the day, right now, if you really look around the country, around the world, there's not enough financial literacy, there's not enough financial education. And the sad part is, had people had more resources or access to some of the information that's available out there that will go through our workshop series, or if you sit down and listen to our providers or actually learn about some of the products and tools that are available, you'd be amazed at what has always been available and just no one really reached out to share it with you. So our workshop, again, World System Builder Financial Foundation Educational Program. We have a campaign. We want to educate 30 million families by 2030. And we offer this mainly because our mission and our goal is to empower communities through financial literacy and understanding. Okay? So before we get started, disclaimer: information in this presentation should not be interpreted as accounting, investment, legal, or tax advice. It is not an offer to sell or a solicitation to buy any security, insurance, or any other financial product. Okay, the workshop is for educational purposes only. Our national campaign for financial literacy is to bring financial awareness and education. You will not learn everything during the course of this workshop. However, we hope you gain more confidence and take action towards reaching your goals. Being part of our campaign, we encourage you to help empower others to do the same. To help us preserve the integrity and context of this information, please do not take any photos, videos, or record this workshop. We do always recommend our communities, our guests, to attend these workshops live in person or even in a live Zoom session, because then you get to ask questions, you get more clarifications. Through recordings, you'll get the basic fundamentals, and then you'd reach out to your trainer or your agent to clarify anything that you want more details in. Okay, so always reach out to the person who introduced you or invited you. And if you get a chance, we have a black and white workbook that complements our workshop slides. Okay, there are some exercises that you will see to fill out in the workbook, and you'll get that information from our slides. Financial education isn't an option, it's a necessity. World System Builder is committed to educating and empowering 30 million families by 2030. Be a part of the campaign that is revolutionizing the financial industry. Build with a system that bridges financial education and financial independence. Right? So while you're sitting here, even now, think of others who might be down on their luck, who might be drowning in debt, who might be looking for alternative streams of income. They might be looking to transition into a different career field, or they just might need some extra income. Okay, a lot of times some of the income that you might find might be simply by reducing the monthly expenses that you have and really putting it somewhere where it continue to grow compounding interest for you. So welcome to our workshop. Every day we are flooded with information. Many offer financial advice but are unlicensed or without industry experience. And those in the old traditional industry narrowly focus on one or two aspects of your finances. This is really important to understand because in financial services, there's many different lanes, there's many different avenues. So just because you hear it from one person, it might not necessarily mean they know the other options or that they're even interested in sharing the other options. Okay, so for example, if you go to the bank for financial literacy, they're going to teach you about how credit cards work. They're going to teach you about how savings and debit accounts work, checking accounts, right? But they're not going to talk to you about investments. They're really not going to talk to you about insurance. They're not going to talk to you about real estate investments. They're not going to talk outside of what they're allowed to really talk about. No different than a CPA. A CPA handles and prepares tax. It doesn't mean that they'll advise you on tax or that they know where or suggest where to put your money for tax purposes. They prepare the tax so it could be submitted to the IRS, right? Some CPAs are better than others. Some CPAs are more comfortable in certain industries than they are all around. So someone that is working in the medical industry, working tax preparation for doctors, nurses, healthcare, might not be the same advice or suggestion as someone that works in the industry of steel and metal, for example. right? So just because you go to someone that is in the financial service industry doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to always recommend, suggest, or advise the best way possible to what your situation is. Okay? At WSB, the reason why that's important is because at WSB, we're here to help you look at the total picture, a holistic approach. All right, we want to plan for every single aspect of the future. Right? There's going to be college planning necessary. There's going to be retirement planning necessary. Estate planning consideration. There's plenty of different avenues where you would have to go to a different individual that specializes to really answer those questions or to get the best options in each category. Right? So we look at the holistic approach, and our workshops are designed to educate and empower you to become your own money manager. We strongly believe that every family should have at least one financial planner or one certified or licensed financial professional in their family, so that way they can see the overall picture. Because the reality is there is no cookie cutter method, there is no cookie cutter company, product or tool. There is no one size fit all kind of solution. Everyone is unique and everyone has different goals and dreams that they're working towards. Okay, and it's important to understand that, because in order to control your finances, you need to understand what the options are, because that's really the only way you can control your future. Okay, in America, they talk about independence and freedom, but to be really honest, if you don't have financial freedom, it's very difficult to obtain that idea of freedom. So in workshop 1, what we're going to talk about is identifying your goals. It's super important, because if you don't have goals attached to behaviors, it's very hard to build the habits and discipline needed to achieve what you're looking for. Okay, so we're going to identify your goals. We're going to talk about the financial foundation mindset. This is something that you're going to see throughout all of our workshops, throughout any material that's going to come across, mainly because you have to understand the importance of the financial foundation before you start building. We're going to talk what the wealth formula is and how it can help you. We're going to talk about how to consider time and inflation with the compounding effect on your assets. Okay, because at the end of the day, to me, okay, this is my personal opinion, to me, money is nothing more than units of options. Okay, the more money you have, the more options you have, right? Simple. And that's the same for credit. Like for me, credit scores are nothing more than units of trust. Right? So the more trust you have, or the higher the credit score you have, the more some of these lenders would allow you to borrow their money at better percentages, right? But that's all in the concept of money. So in this little slide here, think back to the first time you had a job, and how did it feel when you actually earned a paycheck, right? Because it's important, because sometimes, right, we don't understand the value of money until we understand how many hours we had to put in to earn that money. Okay, so think back to a time when someone taught you about the value of money, right? The reason why these are important, because a lot of times we grow up and we kind of figure it out on our own, or we listen to our parents, and even though they have really good intentions, they can't teach you what they don't know, right? So it's hard when you take advice and you have different goals or different missions, and you're getting limited resources or limited information based on what their prior knowledge is. And that's why for us, we want to really empower the community, because the more we know, the better we can pass down the understanding of money management. Okay, so what are the most common things you financially plan for? It's amazing, because if someone has a wedding coming up, or a trip or a vacation coming up, they do an amazing job saving money, right? But when there is no goal that they're working towards, we kind of just play by ear and live paycheck to paycheck, right? So some of the common things that we financially plan for: school and education. College education has become super expensive, right? So it's definitely something you have to plan for, or you're not going to be able to really enjoy it. We plan for vacation and travel, engagement and weddings, like I shared. To buy a home, it takes a lot of responsibility to build up the down payment to buy a home. And then for retirement, and when you really look at this slide, when it comes to retirement, not many people are actually able to retire out there today. Okay, you have all these 401ks, you have all these buy term invested difference, you have all these strategies. Today there's FIRE method and extreme FIRE or something FIRE, right? financially independent, retire early, right? But the reality is most people cannot retire. So even though there's a lot of strategies out there, like all the different diet plans and meal plans, and you know what I mean, it's hard to obtain a lot of these financial goals when you don't have the goals that you really want. You know, and the sad thing is most people aren't looking far enough into the future where they're planning for it. Okay. So setting and reevaluating goals is an important part of being financially secure. If you're saving and building your future without solid goals, you're more likely to overspend and not have the resources when you need it most. Okay, and I want you to take a look around. There's a lot of people who do make six-figure salaries, but the reality is the six-figure salary in today's society is still leaving people living paycheck to paycheck. You know, and that's scary because we have to plan these in advance, because let's say if we're talking about retirement, if we're living on a six-figure salary today, paycheck to paycheck, how are we going to survive for 20, 30 years in retirement without that steady income or that salary? Does that make sense? Okay, so goal setting, financial goals are generally based on the amount and time needed. Different ages will have different goals and different time frames. If you look in the bottom right corner there's a workbook 6. If you have the black and white workbook, what that tells us is that on page 6, there will be some slots that you need to answer, and it's going to come from this slide. Okay? When it comes to goal setting, we have 3 different phases of goal settings, and they're always going to update, they're always going to change, mainly because as soon as we accomplish one set of goals, we should have new ones. Okay? So the first category of goals, short-term goals, anything that you want to achieve within 1 year or less. Okay, maybe pay off some debt, set up a vacation for next year. Let's see, short-term goals, maybe there's something that you really wanted as a birthday gift for someone, but you want to set them up so that way you know how to allocate the money, right? Paying yourself first is definitely going to be super important. Okay, and I say that because we work and we give up 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 hours of our time weeks prior. Okay, and the problem is by the time our paycheck clears, if you're a W-2 worker, chances are taxes have already been taken out. So the government has already been paid first from the time that you've already put in. Okay? By the time your check clears, all that's left over usually is already accounted for by somebody else. What do I mean by that? By the time your check clears and you can actually access your money, you now have to pay mortgage or rent. You have to pay electricity, gas, any type of other bills you might have, property tax if you have a mortgage, grocery bills that you might have charged on credit card, gas, right? So everyone else is in line waiting for you to clear your check so that they can get paid. And a lot of times what ends up happening is that we never even earn a single penny from our own paychecks because it's already going out the door to somebody else. Okay? So short-term goals, one, learn how to pay yourself first, right? If you're going to put in 40, 50, 60 hours of your time to a job, at least pay yourself something from that. We recommend 10%, depending on where you are in your situation, right? Start off at 10% if you can. But you want to set these short-term goals so that way you know where every penny is accounted for. Okay, the second category is midterm goals, where it's between 1 to 5 years. This is a good time where you might want to pay off a car. Usually a car is a 6-year loan. You might want to pay off some credit card debts. You want to save some money for a down payment, right? Usually you can buy a house within 5 years if you plan it out, 2 to 3 years if you're aggressive. Or have, if you don't need to rebuild your credit score or something, right? So you want to have that midterm goals. And then you want to have the long-term goals that are 5 years and over. So if you have a young child today or multiple children, you want to make sure that you have money set aside growing for them so that way they have something available when it comes time to pay the student loans, right? Maybe, again, in this example, they say down payment for a house over 5 years, but it could be achieved sooner. Everyone starts at different phases. Everyone comes across our workshop at different stages in their financial journey. But more importantly here, you see retirement, okay? And retirement is important. We already mentioned most people cannot afford to retire. But in retirement, I also want you to keep in mind that you also want to plan for long-term care in the event you are sick. in retirement, right? We're not just going to retire and have all the energy in the world. Usually in the old age, that's when health catches up to us. So retirement and long-term care should be a consideration for the 5-year or longer bucket, okay? So at the end of the day, each goal must be paired with an action, right? If you don't have any actions towards these goals, it's just a wish. And what are you doing to achieve that goal? It's very complicated because, you know, we have our spending habits, we have our things that we like to spend money on. You know, some people like 5 cups of coffee a day. Some people like their $5, right? Starbucks, but we call it $5. Nowadays, it's more than $5. That's something we used to make. We joke around about like 10 years ago. But you have to pair up all the goals with actions, okay? And every day should be intentional. That's why, like, you know, I don't know if you guys have listened to or heard or read the book Outwitting the Devil by Napoleon Hill, but it talks about how people drift by in life and we're like zombies, or we're like unaware of how we are, okay? We're just kind of following the trends and we kind of let life slip us by, right? So we have to be very intentional with our daily actions, so that way it's going to, 1, serve a purpose, and 2, help us reach our goals. Here on this slide, you're going to see our personal financial strategy. If you have the black and white workbook, this will be one of the pages in there. I do recommend that you take photocopies and have them around. For those that are new, I recommend every 3 to 6 months, fill this out. Once you get really comfortable with managing your finances, then once a year you should be doing this. And I say that because a lot of times we don't know how much money we actually have, because when we get a $5,000 raise, a $20,000 bonus, when we get extra money, promotions, or switch to a new job with a higher pay, we don't pay attention to the small additions that they add to our paychecks, because usually they're like $50 or less. They're not very significant, right? If you think about it, a $5,000 raise at the end of the year, if you take that $5,000 and divide it by, I'm going to do it real quick here on my phone. Let me see, $5,000 a year. After taxes and inflation, you really don't even have $5,000. So, but I'm just going to do that. Let's say $5,000 divided by 52 weeks. That's only $96 a week. So if you take that $96 a week and divide that by 40 hours, that's an extra $2 an hour. Very insignificant when you look at it on an hourly basis, right? And the reason why I say that is because now when we go out to buy McDonald's, or when we go to buy a coffee or something, we're going to add a donut to it, and we're not going to notice that extra raise that we got because it just got consumed and used up almost immediately, right? So in this financial strategy, you're going to see that we do mention the goals in there. It is super important because, again, we want this to mean something for you. This whole journey of understanding how to manage your money has to mean something, and it has to provide or produce something for you. Because in 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, you want to be at a better place where your money now is a lot more fluid and it should be making money for you, right? Because that's the goal. In America, if your money is not working harder for you to make money for you, it is very hard to retire, okay? So what exactly are you saving for? Here's a list of ideas, or here's a memory jogger, or possibly just a list for you to consider new things that you might not have thought about in the first original sit down. Okay, pay off credit cards, some recreation. Some people love camping, some people like snowboarding, hiking, maybe investment properties, right? Sometimes you might want to take a road trip, spend some time. Maybe there's some things on your bucket list that you'd want to accomplish. Okay, but these are the goals that we need to write down and commit to, because you got to reward yourself for the discipline and the challenges that you're going to overcome when you're trying to change and monitor your money management. Okay, so some formulas to help you really understand how money works. Formula 1020. We're going to go into detail what Formula 1020 is referring to. We have the Saving Your Future book, that blue book that you see on the side there. Very short read, maybe 100 pages or less. But in that book, there's a lot of information that they should have taught us in schools, but they don't. So if you don't have a copy of that blue book, reach out to the person that introduced you or invited you to this so that you can have access. And again, it's a short read. It'll introduce you to a lot of fundamentals that you haven't, or you might have known and just needed more description or detail about, okay? FNA, or financial needs analysis. This is great to see where you are, and what it does is it gives you a projection on where you could be or should be. Okay, that's the FNA. The PFS is personal financial strategy. That is going to be that form that we saw in this last slide here, PFS. When you sit down for a free consultation and really go over and start your journey on managing your own money, fill this out. Again, when you're new, do it every 3 months. Once you get better, you can decrease on frequency, but at least once a year, because when you get raises, bonuses, you want to make sure you know exactly where all of that is going. Surprisingly enough, one of my clients, we sat down and they've gotten promotions and raises over the last 5 years, and yet they were telling us that they were still struggling and living paycheck to paycheck. After we did their personal financial strategy, they realized that they were adding in an extra trip every year, which took up pretty much the extra that they were making. Okay, and again, we don't notice that because the changes are so small, the additions are so small usually. Okay, and then financial calculators. We have financial calculators that will help determine where you're at, where you want to be, what kind of interest rates you have to earn, or what you need in order to gain or achieve those goals, right? But whichever strategy you decide to use, just remember you have to start today. Because if you think about it, where you are today and where you were a year ago has a lot changed for you. Have you been able to advance or grow financially more secure in that last year? How about in the last 5 years, right? Where you were 5 years ago to where you are today, right? Unless you're still in high school 5 years ago, chances are people in their working careers don't really see a big incremental change to their lifestyle, okay? And the reason why that's important is because my follow-up question is, where do you want to be a year from now? Where do you want to be 5 years from now, right? So calculating your goals, how much do you need? And this is going to show a little bit about compounding interest, a little bit about planning early, right? So in workbook page number 8, you're going to see this here, where if you wanted to have $1 million by age 65, and I want you to really pay attention to the slide and how much time plays a role into this. Okay, that's why we always try to encourage people, the sooner you start, the better, because this is the youngest we're ever going to be. All right, so for retirement, if you're looking to have $1 million by the age of 65, and you're able to find something that gives you an 8% return, you would need to be able to put this much away each month. All right, so at age 25, you would have to put a little bit less than $10 a day, or less than $300 a month. Okay, honestly, if I knew this when I was younger, I would be at a way better place than where I am today. All right, because when I went to college, I partied a lot. I spent a lot. Okay, I was introduced to credit cards. I had access to nightlife, club promoters. Turned 21, had access to bars, clubs. And then after school, after I graduated college the first time around, I was introduced to the military, right? I joined the military after 9/11. And again, everything was paid for in the military, and basically the paycheck was just disposable income, right? At least that's what I thought at the time. And then after the military, I went back to college again, but I started saving a little bit more. I was a little bit more responsible the second time around in college. But if you look at this example here, if you wanted $1 million by the age of 65, someone who is 25 only has to save $300 a month. Okay? And that is completely doable. That's less than $100 a week. But if you waited just 10 years, look how much this changes. Because at 35 years old, if you want to have $1 million at age 65 with 8% return, at 35 years old, you're going to have to put away $671 a month, right? It's still achievable, but usually at 35, now you have other responsibilities. You might have a mortgage at this point. You might have some children at this point, right? So the thought of saving up extra money becomes a little bit more challenging. Or we might say, hey, you know what? My kids are almost grown. They're almost going to be moved out. I'm going to have some free time. So let's say if we waited till age 45, okay, at age 45, and we still want to reach that $1 million mark by the age of 65 with an 8% return, now we're looking to put around $1,700 a month. Okay, that becomes a lot more challenging because for some people, $1,700 a month might be their rent. Okay, maybe we're doing better in our career, maybe not, right? But the whole point of this whole slide here is that the sooner we start, the better it is, because we allow the money to work harder, right? We could put away less money, but the compounding interest will work harder for us over those decades. Right here, you can scan that QR code. It will take you to a screen where you can plug in your numbers and it'll calculate for you how much you need to set aside if you want to have $1 million by age 65. Okay, if you have the black and white workbook, that will also be in there. But work with someone on your goals, and also tell people so that way they can hold you accountable. That way, when they see you going out to buy a new pair of shoes or a new handbag, they can remind you and say, hey, how close are you to your goal? Right? Not out of jealousy or anything, but sometimes we buy things we don't need with the money we don't have to impress people that we don't even like. And usually when we're in our younger years, that's what really takes over, is that, we have access to more money than we had before, and we're just exploring, right? And some people explore their way into a lifetime of debt. So to access your current situation, develop a strategy to reach them, and what you'll do after you achieve these goals, because again, goals always get upgraded. You always add more. Okay. So obstacles along the way. We have to prepare for things. Life isn't always going to go the way we expect it to, right? Some people think, oh, I'm going to have this job, and I'm from here on, I'm always going to move up. But we never know. COVID shook up a lot of different things, right? The 2008 market crash shook up a lot of things. People that thought they were on a safe track towards retirement, didn't happen that way, right? And that's the thing we have to always keep in mind, that the more prepared we are, the less we have to stress and worry when those kind of situations happen. So on the road to our goals, we must prepare for what life happens, or when life happens. Broken down car, lost property, or a loved one. Goals can be pushed further away due to financial setbacks. We also got to factor in health issues, right? If we can't work due to health-related reasons, we gotta factor that in too. Would you rather feel certain in your finances or scramble by asking for donations through crowdfunding? Okay, having peace of mind is so important, and that, and for me, when I think of peace of mind, I think of when I had COVID. Okay, and I'm not going to go into detail, but I do know the one thing. While I was recovering for COVID, after they told me I was going to die, the first thing I did was settle my finances, because everything was prepared in advance, luckily. And I was able to just focus on healing. Okay, whatever I had to do to live, that's the only, I didn't worry about anything else, because again, I had everything planned out, and I wrote it out to make sure that my family would be all set. Okay, and right after that, that's when we really went heavy into creating a trust, because that's when I realized how important financial planning and peace of mind really is. So let's prepare for these unexpected events by having the proper financial foundation. And when we talk about financial foundation, this is what we want you to think about. Okay, and the reason being is because, again, I started this off by saying there's a lot of people with financial knowledge, but it might be in all different lanes. Okay, when you talk to someone about financial foundation and their first response is investments, I would be careful. About that, mainly because if you're putting all your eggs into that basket and hoping that your money is going to grow overnight for you, look at what happened during 2008, right? Look at what happened during COVID, when people lost their jobs and companies shut down. Okay, the stock market today, if someone sends out a tweet or if there's a new war that starts up, it could affect your money, right? I'm not saying that you shouldn't diversify and have some investments, but what you want to do is you want to make sure that the money that you do have in investments are kind of like disposable income, okay? Because it takes time for it to rebound when it does drop. So when you think about how a foundation should be built, okay, think about building a house. You always want the base to be the strongest. Okay, you don't want the roof to be the strongest or the heaviest. You want the base to be the strongest. Okay, and for us, that has to be proper protection. Okay, and the reason why I say that is because when it comes to protection, this is how you can almost pretty much almost create that peace of mind. Okay, because protection includes income replacement, it includes income protection, it includes life insurance, health insurance, car insurance, mortgage insurance, right? Because if anything happened, you're gonna get more back in return than what you would essentially lose other than a life, right? If you buy a house and you did not buy home buyer's insurance and there was a flood, or you didn't have flood insurance in this example, if you didn't have flood insurance and there was a flood that dampened your basement, it rotted, mold, like everything was grown, like, you know what I mean? You would be at a loss, right? That's why having the proper protection set up in place is so important, okay? And then we want to help people get out of debt. Right now, if you look at this, just these two blocks alone, the debt management column for many people are a lot bigger than their protection problem, right? Because most people they don't really plan for protection. They don't have anything to replace their income. Most people just rely on their jobs. Okay, we know that because during COVID, when companies shut down and laid people off, most people didn't have the emergency fund to really take care of their family, right? They relied on the stipend. They relied on everything else other than themselves. Okay, so we want to make sure that the proper protection is in place. We want to make sure that we minimize, reduce, or even cancel out all the debt that you have, right? And then we want to make sure we have at least 3 to 6 months of emergency funds set aside. Once you can build up, once you can free up some more money and build up some more, you want at least 1 year's worth in your emergency fund. Okay, when I say 1 year's worth, or when I say 3 months, 6 months, we're talking about the rent or the mortgage payment, groceries, bills, utilities, anything that you would have to pay within a month. You should have that set aside that can cover you for up to 1 year. Okay, and then after that would be investments. You see how important this is, though, is because most people today only have investments. They have investments and they still have debt. They have investments and they have no emergency fund. They have investments and they have no income protection or income replacement. Okay? So building your savings, growing your wealth, definitely look at this financial foundation. Every single workshop that we have will refer back to this. This is our wealth formula. If you want to create wealth, there is a mathematical equation, a mathematical problem, right? You could always reverse engineer. If you know you want a certain amount by a certain age, we could always reverse engineer and work our way back to make sure that you can get there. Okay, but what I really want you to pay attention to, there are some factors that we cannot control. Okay, the wealth formula, of course, to build wealth, you're going to need assets or money. Okay, but we also need time. Okay, like we mentioned earlier, the 25-year-old could put less in and still reach $1 million versus the 45-year-old who waited a little bit longer. They have to pay more, because they have less time to allow that compounding interest or compounding growth to take place. Okay? Money and time, that is something that we can control. Right now, if we're not making enough, then of course we have to spend more time getting a second job, third job, right? But the goal is, if your money is making money for you, you can actually buy back your time, right? If your money is making money faster for you, then you can start buying back your time later on. And what I mean is, because when we're sick and we can't go to work, our money is still working. When we go to sleep or when we're on vacation and we're not at our job to trade our time for money, our money is still making money. Okay? So these are two factors that, one, when it comes to time, if you lose it, you can't get it back. Right? So we have to maximize the amount of time that we do have. That's why I say start as soon as possible. But we have a little bit more control over these than other factors in this. Rate of return is the interest rate. Okay, you need to know how interest rates work, because they will work against you every single time if you don't know how to offset that. Okay, what I mean, if you have a mortgage, there's an interest rate to your mortgage. If you have a car loan, there's an interest rate to that. Credit cards, student loans, they all have interest rates that are attached to them. Okay, that's just the way that works. But if you understand how money works, we can also find interest rates that work for us. And the goal would be finding ways where our money is netting more positive than it is negative. Okay? What do I mean by that? If I found an account that gave me 8 to 10% returns, right? If my money is growing 8 to 10% wherever I'm placing it, parking that money, and my mortgage is only 3%, there's no reason why I would rush to pay off a mortgage that's charging me only 3% when I could put that liquid cash somewhere where it's earning me 8 to 10%. Because after I pay the mortgage, I'm still netting 7%, 5%, whatever the difference is, right? So we can have the rate of returns work for us. And that's why, we talk about debt management, which will be in workshop number 2, but we want to pay off the big interest rates first, because that is something that can be overwhelming fast. But you want to make sure that you're putting your money in areas where your money can start making returns for you. Inflation and tax, these are the two factors that we cannot control. Okay, we know that during COVID time, inflation went up as high as 8 to 9%. So when you really look at it, if you're making $100,000 a year and you had a 5% raise, which is very unheard of, not very common, you're going to lose a lot of that 5% to inflation and tax, right? And obviously, the more money you make, the higher your tax bracket is. But there's taxes on many things, right? Some states don't have income tax, but you're still going to have inheritance tax or estate tax. You're still going to have sales tax. You're going to have taxes on different things. So we need to understand what we cannot control, because we need to offset that. So that way we make sure that we're earning more rate of return than what the inflation and tax equals out to be. And then we have to maximize by making the money and the time work for us. And that is how we make wealth. Okay? So money doesn't grow on trees, but if you work hard enough, if you understand how to make that money work for you, the goal is your money will make money for you. And that is how you create wealth. So let's think about money. Time is money, okay? The expression means that in order to earn money, you must use your time or trade your time to make that money, right? And again, we want to make sure that we can figure out where your money can make money for you, so that way, while you're resting, your money is still working for you, okay? And if your money is working fast enough and hard enough, you don't have to work. That's when you can, quote unquote, retire. Retirement is not about age specific. Retirement is when you no longer rely on a job. Okay, and that's what's important, is that if you let your money work for you, if you look at this example for time, Mr. Start Early started early and let the money work for him, you're going to see how big this difference really plays out, right? So time can be for us or against us. Having a lot of time is advantageous, but even with time on our side, not utilizing it can cost us. So in this example, Mr. Start Early, 25 years old, he put away $300 a month for himself, and he only did it for 7 years, right? And this is an 8% tax deferred account. So what it's saying is that every year he's going to earn 8% on his money. It's tax deferred, so he's not paying any taxes right now. He'll pay it later when he takes it out, right? But he only pays for 7 years. And the total that he pays in the 7 years with that compounding interest, 36 times 7 doesn't give me a total, but 3 times 7 is 21. So he pays probably around $40,000 maybe. But he's able to grow that money by the age of 48 to $128,000. Okay? And then his buddy, oh, look at that. Total contribution, only 25. 7 times 3 is 21. Okay, yeah. So he paid in a total of $25,200. But then his friend's like, you know what? That's a great plan. You know what? I'm going to do what you're doing, and I'm going to start now, 7 years later. Right? He starts 7 years later, but he has to save a lot longer. Okay? So he actually saves from 32 years old to 48, which is about 16 years there. And he ends up putting in a total of $61,000 into the same setup, right? But if you take a look at age 48, Mr. Start Early has $128,000, and he only put in $25,000, whereas Mr. Wait Longer started later, ended up putting in $61,000, and only received really $3,000 more at $131,000. And that's why time is so important, right? So for us, when we see examples like this, and when we actually do illustrations, we look at how the youth, the next generation, they have time on their side, right? Like, they are younger, they can allow their money to work and grow harder for them. So that way, by the time they're older, their money is already like an avalanche. There's no slowing it down, right? For us who are a little bit older, we got to put in a little bit more to make up for the times that we didn't know about this. Rate of return, again, is just the interest. For example, if you earn $6 on 100, that's $6. That's a 6% return, but that's $6. Okay, and the real goal is to understand the rule of 72, mainly because, I mean, Albert Einstein made this rule popular. If you take 72 divided by the interest rates, it tells you how many years it takes for your money to double. So if you know what kind of interest you're getting back, you can calculate to see how many years for your money to double. And then you can figure out how many more of those doubles you have before you need to retire. Right? So for example, if I'm 40 years old and my money can double every 10 years, I know that whatever I put in today at 50 is going to be double. At 60 is going to be double of the last amount. You know, at 70 is going to be double. You know what I mean? So you can work and calculate it out that way. For example, a 4% return would mean that it will take 18 years for your money to double. So in this example, I want you to notice, even though we're just talking about a 2% difference, okay, I want you to see how much different, even though it's a 2% difference on the interest rate, I want you to see what the total difference comes out to be monetarily. Okay, this is on workbook page 11 if you have your workbook. But in this example, if you started with $10,000, let's say myself, I got Mr. B and Mrs. C. We all have $10,000 and we all find different accounts to put our money in. I found something that gave me a 6% return. And after 36 years, my $10,000 now becomes $81,000, which I'm not going to complain about that. Okay, I started out with 10,000. I now have 81. Not going to complain, right? But Mr. B found something that gave him 8%. And I just want you to look, even though it's just a 2% difference, his money is doubling every 9 years. Right, so he puts in that $10,000, and by the time 36 years come by, he now has double. Okay, a 2% difference, but he has double what I have. I have $80,000. He has $160,000. Okay, and then Mrs. C, she found something that gave 10%. Again, just a 2% difference. What do you think is going to happen compared to Mr. B's? Because her money now is doubling every 7.2 years. So 36 years later, Mrs. C has almost double what Mr. B has. You see? So the interest rate, even though it's very small, the reason why I say this is because when you have a car loan at 6%, if you have a personal loan at 13%, credit card at 30%, right? All of that, just imagine 30%, the debt is doubling every 2 years or 2.5 years. Right? That's what we have to figure out. If you have a 1% fee on your account, right? A 1% fee is half of whatever this is, right? Because this is 2% and it's growing by 80,000. So in this example, if you had a 1% difference, you know what I mean? It would be a $40,000 difference in this example. But that's why understanding it is so important. So a really quick quiz. I mean, obviously no one's here. This is why it's fun when you're doing it live. But if you put $100,000 into an account and in 9 years it's guaranteed to double to $200,000, what is your current rate of return? Okay. If you take 72 divided by 9, you're going to get the answer of 8%. Okay. If you ignore paying the balance on one of your credit cards and the APR is 18%, how many years will your debt balance double? Again, if you take 72 divided by 18, that comes out to about 4 years. So every 4 years, so imagine people who are paying minimum on their credit card debts, right? They are paying some, they're picking away at it slowly, but it's still compounding against them greatly. Using the previous table at a 10% rate of return, approximately how much money would you have after 43 years? Okay, the last table, if you go back, at a 10% return, 48 years, which is another 12 years on this last column, it would probably double that amount. So you're talking about over $600,000. Okay. So that's why understanding the rule of 72 is important, because it helps us calculate or guesstimate a lot faster where our money is going. Inflation is the cost of living. If you look at houses today, after COVID, you can definitely see the change in the market. My house before COVID was in 2017, the house was like about $490, I believe. Today, my house is about $650,000, $700,000, right? And it's 2000, so it's only been like 8 years, right? But if you look at this, inflation has been on average 3.7%, right? Some years are higher than others. If you look at the 70s, gas was only 53 cents a gallon. I remember when I first started driving, it was like 95 cents a gallon. That was like in 98, 99. 2000 today, I mean, $2, that's fairly cheap. I mean, 2025 gas prices like $3.50 in some areas. Okay, new home back then, you could buy a new home for $25,000. Today, like I mentioned, like they're $600,000 for the same exact home. But the problem in this picture is not so much as the cost of everything going up so quickly, but wages are not growing exponentially fast like everything else. If you look at it, 9,400 in the 70s, it only went up like 5 times, 6 times. Okay, whereas the house price went up 25,000 to 400, it went up like 8 times. Right? So wages aren't growing as fast as the cost of everything else. So we have to find other ways to make sure our money is making more money, because our wages and our salaries are not increasing fast enough to keep up with cost of living. So assume, and this is just to measure the purchasing power of your dollar, right? So 5 years from now, $100 would only be worth $86. 10 years from now, that same $100 would only be worth $74. The reason why this is important is because think of all the people that save money under their pillow or under their bed, right? When you hold on to cash, what you don't realize is that your cash is losing purchasing power every single year. In order to still have $100 5 years from now, you need to have at least $116 just to equal that $100. 20 years from now, your money loses value close to half. Okay, so just imagine if you're going to retire today, 65. Okay, you're 65 today and you're going to retire. That $100 when you're 85 would only be worth $55. But I guarantee you the cost of everything is still going up. It's not going down the way your purchasing power is going down in your dollar value. Okay, so again, this is a consideration, because when you get to workshop 6, they're going to talk about retirement planning. So what is the purchasing power of your $100 actually doing over time? Okay, again, we can see that in 5 years, that $100 is only worth 86. In 20 years, that same $100 is only worth 55. So the real answer to this is your money is actually decreasing every single year. If you started with $100,000, how much would the increased inflation amount be in 20 years? So if you had 100,000 and we look over to the bottom right corner of the pink box, it's $181 to every 100. So your 100,000 you would need $181,000 to still have that $100,000 of power, purchasing power. So just think about it again. How much do you think you're going to need to retire? If I'm 40 today and I still have another 20 years to work, my dollar value I have to exponentially grow it, or else I'm not going to have as much as I think I have. And then I walk into retirement where money continues to go down in value. Okay. Taxes now. There's 3 different categories in taxes. You can either pay the tax now at the end of the year when we file taxes. You can file tax later, meaning that when you can let it grow, and then when it comes time for distribution, you get taxed on when you use it. Okay, and then tax advantage means you don't have to pay, and potentially if you do it right, it could be tax free. Okay, just to read this real quick, tax now means that any earnings from these accounts must pay tax for that year. That's high yield savings, CDs, stocks, investments. If you sell, you're gonna have to pay now. Okay, Tax later refers to money you put into an account as pre-tax dollars. So money that you have not paid taxes, but you'll have to pay taxes later when you withdraw it. Tax deferred, 401ks, IRAs, annuities, those are all considered tax deferred. And then tax advantage means you generally won't pay taxes when you withdraw money from your account. Tax advantage investment money is after tax money because you already paid taxes on it. So you pay tax in the beginning and you don't have to pay taxes again on that. Good example would be life insurance, or it could be a Roth IRA or Roth 401k. There are some tax advantage categories like 529, but they have specific rules, like it can only be used for educational purposes. You have the HSA, that's tax-free, but you have to use it for medical expenses, right? If you use it outside of that, it is still considered taxable. So let's test your knowledge. Savings account, do you think those are going to be taxed now, taxed later, or tax advantage? So if you have a high yield savings or a regular savings account that gives you 3%, 5% return, you're going to pay taxes at the end of the year on those gains. Okay, so those are going to be taxed now. 401ks, retirement plans, you put before tax money into it, so it's tax deferred, and it grows for you tax free until you take it out in distribution later. Okay, so 401ks will be considered a tax later category. Mutual funds or investment stocks, those are going to be taxed when you sell. Okay, just because, let's say you hold on to a stock or an investment for 20 years, you haven't paid taxes. That's because you haven't realized those gains. So it's not really like a tax later kind of situation. But when you sell the stocks, that's when you're going to have to pay taxes the following year. Okay, so mutual funds, investments, those are usually tax now categories. Roth IRA, again, Roth IRA, I mentioned it. You pay the taxes in front. All the earnings that grows inside of a Roth is also now considered tax advantaged or tax free. So it falls under the tax advantage category. And you can find this on workbook page 13. The tax reduce the impact. What you really want to do is you want as much money in the tax advantage category as possible, right? You're going to diversify. You're going to, you're not going to want to put all your eggs in one basket. They have different advantages, to be honest. But you do want more of the tax advantage money, because the reality is, let's be honest. Do you think taxes are going to go down or go up in the future? Okay. The reason why that's important is because we fight to save, let's say, $1 million by age 65. But the 25-year-old that's going to save $1 million by putting away $300 a month by age 65 to have $1 million, that's 40 years for taxes to go up. You know what I mean? Again, do you really think taxes are going to go down in the future? Right? Chances are not. So you do want a lot more in tax advantage just to grow, a sizable account. It's going to be tax free. But you're always going to have different buckets of money, because you're going to have a 401k, IRA, you're going to have an annuity, you're going to have your mutual funds or savings, check-ins, you might have some high yield savings or CDs, right? So you're going to have a little bit in everything, but you're going to want more of the money tax advantage just to avoid taxes in the future. So in this example, if you save, and this is really important to understand, if you save $100 and you're able to get a 4% return, and this is why high yield savings at 5%, CDs at 5%, or getting a raise at your job at 5% is kind of like a joke. Okay, because once you understand how this works, you kind of look at it and say, well, that wasn't much at all. If you saved $100 and gained a 4% interest, at the end of the year, you're going to get $4. Out of that $4, you're going to have to pay income tax of 25%. Which takes out a whole $1 out of that equation. So now you're really left with $3, right? But then let's calculate inflation. Inflation has been on average, again, 3%. So that wipes out that whole $3, and what do you have? You really have your money back, all right? So anything that's giving you a fixed 4%, a fixed 5%, just understand that they do that because inflation is so high, everything is so high that they want you to put your money there. But the reality is you're not making really much in return. You can sit down with your bank and ask them this. You can sit down with anything that's giving you a fixed 4%. And they're going to say, well, yeah, but at least you didn't lose money. You know what I mean? Your $100 is still $100. And that's really what they're going for, is that they just want you to make sure that your purchasing power is still where it's at. It's keeping up with cost of inflation, but you're not really gaining any money. Some people think they're actually gaining money, and that's the big misconception there. Okay, because the math is math. When you work out the numbers, I mean, math is math. Okay, so you must get at least 4% just to break even. You want to get more than that. Okay, you definitely want to get more than 4%, 5%. Let's see. So what would it mean for you and your family if you have enough money to be financially free? Okay, peace of mind. There's nothing that can beat peace of mind. And until you've been in a financial situation or a health situation, and you had your finances set up to understand the value of it, it's hard to really explain in a story. You know what I mean? Like, some lessons could be taught and some lessons have to be caught. And that peace of mind that I shared when I was in the hospital and they told me I wasn't going to make it, like, that is not something that anyone can really share in a story where I would have understood or related to until that moment. And after that was when I started taking this a lot more seriously, because I understand how valuable and important this could be for families when they're in a situation and they don't have to worry about their financial situation. So what will it mean for your family's future, knowing you and your children understand how money works? And whatever the goals are, long or short term, the journey begins by building a solid financial foundation and understanding the wealth formula. Okay? So in wrapping, these are all the different financial workshops that we offer and we talk about. We want people to have a financial plan for everything that they do. And the best thing is, at least, if worst case scenario, you just have extra money. And that's what we really want, is to show you how to increase your cash flow, spend less, save more. Too many people today spend more. I mean, they spend first and then they try to save what's left over. And chances are there's really not much left over. We want to help reduce your debt, bring your debt down, right? There's good debt, there's bad debt, but we want to make sure that we bring your debt down. We understand how money works, and then have a clear financial goal. Every family, again, should have a money manager in their family to help them set up and understand where the money is. And then build a life full of purpose, okay? A legacy. And then embrace change and expect to succeed. I mean, having a life of purpose is so important. The Rockefellers have been able to preserve their wealth for over 100 years, and they did it using just two very simple tools that we have access to every single day. One is a permanent life insurance policy and the other one's a trust. But because of that, their family never had to borrow money from their bank, from any bank. They just borrowed it from themselves. And I can go into that maybe in a different workshop, but not this one. Here's a testimonial from Victoria. Financial education or literacy with applied knowledge. That's important right there. Okay? Knowledge is not power. Applied knowledge is power. You could learn all you want, but if you don't actually use any of it, it actually doesn't do anything for you. Right? So financial education literacy with applied knowledge will serve your future well. Though we started from scratch in our 20s, we were able to achieve our first $1 million saved and are very proud of our money management discipline since. We're excited to achieve our next financial goals, and this time for sure it won't take that long. Okay, so it's easy to learn how this can work and understand that in order for us to pass it down to our children, we have to understand how money works, right? And only you can take the step necessary for your financial future. No one's going to care about your financial future more than you do. So contact the person who invited you. Be a part of our 30 million families who are financially educated. Think of other friends and family that might benefit from this information and share it with them. Invite them to our workshops or invite them to our office. Get a black and white book. Get the blue book that you see in this picture, right? And start filling it out and start sharing this with the community, because at the end of the day, service to many will lead to greatness. Okay? And thank you for your time, and then check in for workshop 2.